The sound comes first. A crack splits through Courtroom 4B like a rifle shot bouncing off marble walls and oak paneling, echoing through the ears of 34 witnesses who didn't expect violence in a place built on the rule of law. The hand that made that sound is attached to a 220-pound man wearing a uniform. Deputy Sheriff Avery, 14 years on the force, a clean disciplinary jacket, the full institutional weight of the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office behind him. His palm connects flush with the left side of her face. For a single frozen moment, the courtroom stops breathing. She absorbs the impact without flinching. Her body doesn't recoil. Her eyes don't widen. She doesn't cry out or stumble backward. She simply sits there, a woman in her mid-30s. Black composed while an officer of the court has just committed assault in front of a sitting judge. But Avery made a mistake. He assumed motion would follow impact. He assumed she would break. He assumed that a 220-pound man with institutional authority could move through the world the same way he always had. With certainty, with impunity, with the absolute knowledge that his badge would protect him from consequence. Her left hand moves with precision. It catches his wrist before his arm completes the follow-through. The motion is automatic, smooth, like she has done this 10,000 times. Because she has. Her right hand locks his elbow from underneath, controlling the joint the way someone trained in decades of discipline would control it. Not with anger, with geometry. Her hips drop. Her center of gravity shifts low. The floor rushes up to meet him, back first. The impact is heavy and wet and absolute. His skull bounces once against the tile. His eyes roll back. He does not get up. The courtroom remains silent, not the silence of shock, but the silence of a room that has just witnessed the laws of physics override the laws of authority. The woman stands, steps back, assumes a stance that no civilian takes by instinct. Hands open, palms flat, feet shoulder-width apart. It is a stance that only exists in muscle memory forged through years of repetition. Drilling, certification, annual retesting, military training, the kind that doesn't get mentioned on LinkedIn profiles. The bailiff is already reaching for his radio. His voice is steady, professional, trained for crisis. Courtroom 4B, we have an officer who just assaulted a defendant in open court. Defendant responded in self-defense. Officer is down, conscious but non-responsive. Medical units en route. The 911 operator's voice crackles back. Copy that. Units rolling. Is anyone else injured? Negative. The defendant is cooperating. She is standing down, hands visible, not moving. The courtroom does not remain silent for long. But this moment, these few seconds between the impact and the sirens, belongs to her and to him, lying on the tile, staring up at fluorescent lights, understanding with absolute clarity that his career just ended on the floor of a courthouse where he thought he was untouchable. But this didn't begin in a courtroom. This didn't begin with a slap or a hip throw or a man on the floor staring at ceiling lights while his career bled out beside him. It didn't begin when she caught his wrist or locked his elbow or dropped her hips with the precision of someone who had been trained in the exact science of how to use another person's momentum against them. It began in the dark, on a trail, 4 months before the courtroom ever existed, before the charges were filed, before the lawyer was hired, before any of this became public. It began with a single encounter that nobody saw coming. This story has 3 threads still open. One is wrapped around a man who doesn't understand what hit him. One is tangled in a system that promises accountability but delivers paperwork and procedure and endless bureaucratic delays. And one is still waiting in the dark, unnamed, unfound, speaking through a prepaid phone that was used exactly once before disappearing forever. If you want to know what connected them, what she was hiding all those months before the courtroom, and what happens when the institution finally meets someone it cannot break, hit subscribe to our channel, because when this story breaks open, when the audio is recovered and the investigation expands and the system is forced to account for its own failures, it shatters everything about how we think power actually works in America. This is the story of Marin Pryor. This is what happened to her, and this is what she did about it. Marin Pryor moved into Sycamore Ridge 7 weeks before the courtroom incident. Unit 14B, a single-story duplex with tan siding, a chain-link fence around a postage stamp yard. Quiet street. Close to work that she never discussed with anyone who asked. She had chosen the place because it was near her job. She never said where that job was. Every morning her routine was identical. Absolutely identical. Not in the way most people have routines, where you do approximately the same thing but deviate based on mood or circumstance or whether you slept well. Her routine was a script, a protocol. a series of steps executed with the precision of someone who had been trained to execute protocols because deviations from protocol get people killed. 4:47 a.m. Always 4:47 a.m. The alarm doesn't go off because she is already awake. Has been for exactly 2 minutes. Eyes open in the dark. Breathing steady. Internal clock more reliable than any electronic device. She sits up, swings her legs off the bed. Her feet hit the floor in the exact same spot every morning, 2 inches from the edge of the nightstand, aligned with the seam in the hardwood. She doesn't think about it. The body just knows. She makes the bed with institutional precision. Sheets pulled tight. Hospital corners on the top and bottom, on both sides. The kind of tight where a quarter would bounce if you dropped one on the pillow. The kind of tight that takes years to become automatic. Years of training. Years of understanding that discipline is a form of respect for yourself and everyone around you. Her running shoes are positioned by the door, already unlaced to the exact width of her foot. Loosened the night before. Set heel to heel at a 45-degree angle. Her water bottle is on the kitchen counter. Filled, cap sealed. Positioned exactly 2 inches from the edge. Not for appearance. For consistency. For control. She clips a small flashlight to her waistband and straps her phone to her upper arm. Compression leggings. Black. No logos. And a long-sleeve, moisture-wicking top with dark gray reflective strips on the left arm and the back. Not for fashion. For visibility. For safety. One detail a careful observer might notice. She irons her workout clothes. Not the shirt. Synthetic. Wrinkle-resistant. Designed to shed wrinkles the way it sheds sweat. The leggings. She irons a crisp line down each thigh. Barely visible unless you are looking. A habit so unusual that no one in Sycamore Ridge would do it. No one she has ever met outside of one very specific environment irons their leggings. She steps outside. The air is cool, pine-heavy, carrying the faint chemical sweetness of the retention pond a quarter-mile north. Fayetteville, North Carolina. Early spring. The sky is pre-dawn charcoal. Not black, not blue, but that thin membrane between night and morning where shapes exist but colors don't. The Fort Bragg Greenway runs 5.2 miles in a rough loop behind Sycamore Ridge. Paved, lit at the trailheads but dark through the pine corridor. Marin runs it counterclockwise. Same direction every morning. Past the retention pond. Through the stand of longleaf pines. Around the storm drainage junction. And back. Always alone. Always before the neighborhood wakes. She moved to the area 7 weeks ago, which means she had been running this trail alone, in the dark, for 49 consecutive mornings. 49 times the same direction. 49 times the same route. 49 times nobody else was awake to see where she went or what she did or how long she stayed out. The first sign came on day 4, a note tucked under her front door. Printed on HOA letterhead but unsigned. The kind of note that gets sent to enforce compliance without the sender having to take responsibility for the enforcement. It welcomed her to the neighborhood and reminded her that parking was resident only after 9 p.m., and that guests should be mindful of neighborhood standards. She owned one car, a silver Honda Civic, 4 years old. Resident sticker already affixed to the windshield per the lease agreement. She didn't have guests. Hadn't had a single visitor since moving in. Hadn't had anyone to visit with or invite over or acknowledge in any way. The note went to no one else on the block. She checked. She filed it in a folder on her desk. Date stamped it with a pen, top right corner. The date, the exact time she found it, and a note unsigned HOA letterhead. She didn't think about why she did that. Didn't analyze her own behavior. Some people journal. Some people meditate. Some people process their emotions through conversation or therapy or trusted relationships. Marin Pryor documented. She created records. She built evidence before she knew what she would eventually need evidence for. The woman behind the note introduced herself 6 days later. Leah Sutton, early 50s, blonde highlights going silver at the temples, clipboard in one hand, a Yeti tumbler in the other. She materialized at the mailbox cluster at the end of the block just as Marin was pulling envelopes from her slot. The timing felt planned, though Marin had no way to know if it actually was, or if Leah simply had a habit of checking her mail at consistent times and they had just overlapped. Leah smiled. Not the kind of smile that reaches your eyes. The kind that shows teeth but doesn't move anything else. Professional. Trained. You must be 14B. I am Leah, HOA president. We like to introduce ourselves to new residents personally. Marin shook the offered hand. Firm. Brief. Professional. She said her name. Pryor. That is a nice name. Southern Georgia, I would guess. North Carolina originally. But my family moved around. Lovely. Are you renting month to month or did you sign a full lease? Marin looked at her. The question was forward. Too forward for a mailbox introduction, but the tone was wrapped in enough neighborly warmth to make objecting seem rude. Full lease. Wonderful. And is it just you? No roommates, no partner, anything like that? Just me. Well, Leia clicked her pen against the clipboard. We have had some turnover in that unit. 3 tenants in 2 years. Just want to make sure you're settled in for the long term. She emphasized long the way people emphasize words they don't mean. We like to keep things consistent. Marin took her mail, nodded once, walked back to her unit without looking over her shoulder. Inside, she set the mail on the counter and opened the folder on her desk. Wrote Leia Sutton, HOA president. Inquired release term roommates relationship status. Tone probing. No stated reason for questions. Emphasis on consistency and long term. Question pattern suggests either routine interest or targeted surveillance. Date. Time. She closed the folder, put it back in the drawer. She cataloged encounters the way someone trained in documentation would catalog them. Automatic. Precise. Without emotion. As if she had been writing incident logs her entire adult life. Because she had been. Marin's daily rhythms were deliberate and unremarkable to anyone watching from the outside. She worked out at Iron Mill Gym on Bragg Boulevard. Not the big box franchise near the mall with its air conditioning and motivational posters, but the converted warehouse with chalk on the floor and no climate control. She taught a self-defense class there twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, listed on the gym's whiteboard schedule as M. Pryor Functional Fitness Instructor. Nobody at the gym asked what the functional part meant. Nobody noticed that the techniques she taught didn't fit the standard mold. Wrist escapes, hip throws, controlled takedowns, pressure point releases. They were not CrossFit. They were something else entirely. Something trained. Something military. Something that takes 9 years of certification and annual retesting to maintain. She ate alone. Meal prepped on Sundays. Grilled chicken. Brown rice. Steamed broccoli. Portioned into identical containers. 7 containers. 1 for each day. She didn't deviate. She read on her porch in the evenings. Always fiction. Nothing that required her to think about real systems or real problems. She kept her apartment clean. She didn't make noise. She didn't introduce herself to other residents. She existed in Sycamore Ridge the way a ghost exists, present but not really there. And every morning she ran. 4 months before the courtroom at 5:10 a.m. on a Tuesday, Marin ran the Bragg Greenway in pre-dawn darkness. The trail was empty, completely empty, pre-dawn, dark pine corridor. Retention pond nearby, no witnesses, no other runners, no police presence, no cameras that she could see. Just pavement and pines and the sound of her own breathing. Steady and controlled the way it always was. The headlights appeared on the access road without warning. Not unusual technically. The access road was public. People used it to access different parts of the Greenway. But the headlights were stationary. The truck was parked at a junction point where the access road met the trail itself. And as Marin continued running, a man stepped from the truck and positioned himself directly on the path in front of her. He was large, over 200 pounds, confident in the way that comes from knowing the world has always bent to his will. He wore work clothes with a visible belt and what looked like institutional insignia. Authority marker? The kind of thing that made people stop and listen and comply. His opening came as she approached. "This is private property. You don't belong here." The statement was false. The Greenway was public. The trail ran through the city, maintained with city funds, open during posted hours. She was running during posted hours. But he said it with such certainty that for a moment doubt flickered. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe there was something about this section she didn't know. Maybe she had made a mistake. Then it passed. She didn't make mistakes about routes. She had run this trail 49 times in the last 7 weeks. She knew every meter of it. She kept running toward him. Didn't slow down. Didn't deviate. He stepped closer, blocking the path more completely. His voice was louder now. "I told you to get out." She still didn't answer. Didn't slow. Just kept the same pace. The same breathing pattern. The same discipline. She was maybe 10 feet away now. 8 feet. 5. He reached out and grabbed her arm. His hand was heavy. Commanding. Practiced in the art of making people do what he wanted. His fingers closed around her bicep with the confidence of someone who had been doing this for years. Years of traffic stops. Years of encounters where his size and authority and uniform had been enough to change outcomes. She stopped, but didn't pull away. Just looked at his hand, then his face. He tightened his grip. "I know women like you. You come to a neighborhood, you think you own the place. You run at dawn like nobody notices. You think you are better than everyone else. You are trouble. You don't belong here. There were layers in his words. Resentment, territorial control, fear maybe, though it was wrapped up in anger so thick you could miss it if you weren't listening carefully. He was afraid of her, not because she was strong, but because she was different. Because she existed in the world without asking permission. Because she didn't respond to his authority the way he expected people to respond. His free hand moved toward his belt. She saw it, saw where his hand was going, saw the shape of what was there, saw the intention forming in his eyes. She shifted her weight. He struck first, open hand, similar angle to the courtroom slap. But this was a Greenway at dawn, not a public courthouse. This was a place with no witnesses. This was something he thought would never need to be explained. She caught the hand mid-swing. The motion was automatic, smooth, the kind of response that comes from a decade of training, the kind where you don't think, you just react. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had practiced this exact scenario 10,000 times in 10,000 variations. She caught his wrist with her left hand. Her right hand locked his elbow from underneath. Her hips dropped. Her center of gravity shifted low, using his own momentum against him, redirecting his weight through geometry instead of strength. He went down, hard, back first against the pavement. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. His eyes widened. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't process, couldn't understand how the dynamic had reversed so completely in less than 1 second. She stepped back, hands open, feet shoulder-width apart, the same defensive stance, the stance that nobody takes by instinct. He lay there gasping, trying to inhale, his shock so complete that for several seconds he couldn't do anything except try to breathe. She spoke for the first time. "Don't follow me again." Her voice was quiet, not angry, not triumphant, just factual. The kind of calm that comes from someone who has already decided how this ends. She left him on the trail. She didn't call police. She didn't file a report. She didn't document the incident in her folder or take photos or collect names of witnesses. She just left him lying on the pavement, gasping for breath, and ran the remaining 3.2 miles of her routine. He didn't follow. Later, after his breathing returned to normal, after he understood what had happened, after he had processed the humiliation of being thrown by a woman he had been certain he could control, he didn't report it. He could have. The incident was a clear case of assault. The woman was identifiable. He had a badge and the full authority of law enforcement behind him. But reporting it would mean admitting that a woman had thrown him, that she had caught his hand mid-swing and used his own momentum to drop him on pavement, that she had done it with such efficiency and precision that he had been unable to stop her, that she had left him there without further escalation, without damage beyond humiliation. He couldn't explain that to his sergeant, couldn't put that in a report, couldn't live with the knowledge that it would spread through the department and become the kind of story that followed him forever. So he stayed silent. He processed the encounter alone. He tried to understand it, and he made a decision that would echo through the next 4 months. She needed to be removed from the equation, not through the legal system, not through official channels, but through other means. Something was shifting. A man's shame was becoming an intention was becoming a plan, and a plan would eventually become action. After the Greenway incident, things changed. Leah Sutton appeared again, at the mailbox cluster, at the gym parking lot, at the grocery store. Always coincidentally, always with clipboard and questions. The questions became more direct. Where exactly did she work? Had anyone ever complained about her? Was she legal to teach fitness? Did she have all her certifications on file? Had she ever worked in law enforcement? That last question landed differently. Marin didn't answer it, just looked at Leah and said she had taught self-defense at the gym. That was all. The question suggested knowledge, suggested that someone had told Leah something about Marin's background, or that Leah had been asked to ask these specific questions. The HOA began citing violations. Notices appeared on her door. Excessive early morning activity. Potential trespassing reports. Neighborhood concerns about the new resident. Formal? Numbered. Building toward official action. Other neighbors started to notice her differently. Eye contact that felt evaluative. Conversations that stopped when she appeared. The kind of social pressure that doesn't require explicit confrontation. Just a shift in how people treat you when you are around. Someone had primed the community against her. Someone had put out a message. Marin didn't know who or how completely, but she could feel it. The neighborhood was turning. The place that had been neutral was becoming actively hostile. She documented it all. Dates, times, the specific content of each HOA notice, Leah's questions, the moments when neighbors' behavior shifted. She built a record piece by piece without understanding yet what the record would eventually be used for. 3 weeks after the Greenway incident, Marin was at the Iron Mill gym teaching her Tuesday evening self-defense class. A man arrived without signing in, didn't approach the desk, didn't introduce himself, just walked to the corner and watched. Marin recognized him immediately. Same build, same authority marker. But this time the marker was clearer. Police badge on the belt, uniform partially visible under his shirt. The kind of careful disguise that someone wears when they want to be recognized. It was the Greenway man. But now he brought the institution with him. She finished teaching the class, kept her movements smooth and professional and exactly what they always were. Didn't let on that she had noticed him. Didn't change the techniques or the intensity or the tone of the instruction. Just finished, had the students leave, and then walked to the parking lot where he was waiting. He identified himself. Deputy Sheriff Avery, I have some concerns about your teaching methods. Someone has filed a complaint saying you are using excessive force on civilians. The complaint was fabricated. She knew this immediately. There was no such complaint, but he delivered it like he was reading from an official document. The threat was real, though. He was creating a false record. He was beginning the institutional process of removing her. He was taking his personal humiliation and converting it into official scrutiny. Marin didn't defend herself, didn't explain, didn't argue about the complaint or deny the allegations. She just listened while he spoke about how people were watching her. How people didn't appreciate outsiders teaching weapons training to neighborhood kids. How she should be more careful about her future. When he was finished, she said she understood. Thanked him for coming by. Walked to her car. Later at home, she documented the encounter. His name, his badge number. She had memorized it. The exact words he had used. His tone. The implicit threat underneath the official language. The weaponization of bureaucracy against a personal grudge. She understood now what was happening. The personal had become institutional. One officer's shame was becoming official scrutiny, and the weight of the system was being pressed down on her head. The complaints multiplied after Avery's visit. Anonymous tips arrived at the state licensing board. Accusations of aggressive teaching, unsafe techniques, potential safety violations, insufficient credentials. The board opened an investigation. Marin received official notification that they were reviewing her teaching methods. The gym owner called her in. He believed her. He said he believed her right away before she had even finished explaining. But the licensing board was asking questions. The board was taking the complaint seriously, and the gym could not afford the liability of keeping her employed while the investigation was ongoing. She was fired, not for cause, just for operational concerns. The language was bureaucratic and bloodless. It didn't say she had done anything wrong. It just said she could not work there anymore. Her only income was gone. Her routine was fractured. The gym had been the one place she existed with purpose, teaching people how to defend themselves, showing them that discipline and technique could overcome size and strength. That was gone now. The surveillance didn't stop. It intensified. One morning her car was in the parking lot and her tires were slashed. All 4 of them. Not one. All 4. The kind of violence that requires planning and intention. She reported it to the police. Officers arrived and took a statement and said they would investigate. They didn't investigate. No follow-up. No suspects. No security footage reviewed. An anonymous note appeared under her door. Leave town or next time it is worse. She didn't leave. Instead, she documented everything. She took photos of the slashed tires. She photographed the threatening note. She wrote down the time the tires were slashed. Sometime between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., she estimated. She created a timeline of the escalation. Every encounter. Every complaint. Every threat. She was building a case. She didn't know yet what case she was building. But she was preparing for something. For a trial, maybe. For a confrontation. For a moment when someone would have to account for what they had done to her. Avery filed an official complaint with the state licensing board. Unlicensed weapons instruction. Safety violations. Potential criminal activity. The complaint was detailed and specific and completely false. It contained descriptions of teaching methods she had never used. It contained stories from fictional students she had never taught. It was constructed with precision. The kind of precision that suggests help. That suggests someone coaching on what language to use, what accusations to make, how to make them sound official and credible. The board opened a full investigation. They sent Marin official notification. She had 30 days to respond, to provide documentation, to defend herself against accusations she hadn't committed. She hired a lawyer. Grant Holloway specialized in cases that the system wanted to bury, cases where power was being misused, cases where institutions were protecting their own. He had built a career on taking on scenarios where the deck was stacked, where the official narrative was already written, where justice seemed impossible. Holloway reviewed the evidence with her. The complaint from Avery, the anonymous tips, the licensing board notice, the termination letter from the gym. All of it. His assessment was cold and clear. This is retaliation. But proving it means you have to fight them in court. It means everything about you becomes public. It means they get to question your credibility, your background, your every choice. Marin showed him her documentation. Folder after folder. Carefully organized, dated, timed, precise. Every encounter with Laya, every HOA notice, the threatening note, the slashed tires, Avery's visit to the gym, everything recorded. Dated, time-stamped. Holloway's expression shifted when he saw it. This is meticulous, but it is also evidence that you knew something was coming. Why did you not report it? Marin's answer was simple. Because I needed proof first. She understood something that Holloway was only beginning to realize. The system protects badges before it protects citizens. The system protects its own before it protects truth. So you didn't go to the system when you suspected they were targeting you. You documented. You built evidence. You waited until you had enough to make them listen. The state licensing board, moving through its own procedures, made a recommendation. Her teaching license should be suspended, pending further investigation. Avery leaked this to the local media as a victory. Dangerous instructor removed from community due to safety violations. Investigation ongoing into teaching methods that endangered students. It was all false. There were no endangered students. There was no dangerous instruction. There was only a woman who had thrown a man and refused to disappear because of his shame. But the damage was done. She was now publicly identified as unsafe. Publicly identified as someone under investigation. Publicly identified as a threat to the community. The trial date was set. It would be a state licensing board hearing, not a criminal trial. But the stakes were the same. Her livelihood. Her reputation. Her ability to live in the world without the shadow of false accusations hanging over her. She prepared with Holloway. He coached her on testimony, on demeanor, on how to appear sympathetic, how to seem credible, how to convince a board of people she had never met that she was not what the official narrative said she was. The night before the trial, she didn't sleep. She sat in her apartment in the dark and reviewed her documentation one final time. Every piece of evidence, every dated entry, every moment of the escalation that had led her to this point. Her mother called. The first time we really hear her voice. "Are you ready?" Marin's answer was minimal. Controlled. "Yes, ma'am." Her mother. "Your father would be proud of you." He always said the truth matters more than comfort. That doing the right thing is harder than doing the easy thing. That is the Pryor family legacy. The reference to her dead father landed quietly. Staff Sergeant Elmore Pryor. 22 years in the military. Infantry, then Provost Marshal's office. He had died 4 years ago. Heart attack. 59 years old. Marin had been stationed in South Korea when she got the call. Flew home on emergency leave. Buried him in a flag-draped casket. Reported back to duty 11 days later. She had never talked about him. Not to colleagues. Not to neighbors. Not to lawyers. The photograph of him in dress uniform was in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. Face down. Not forgotten. Protected. Some things you keep face down because looking at them too often dulls the edge. And Marin Pryor needed her edges sharp. But her mother's words. That reference to her father. To the Pryor family legacy. It anchored something. It reminded Marin that everything she had been through, everything she was about to face, was rooted in something deeper than her own humiliation or her own desire for justice. It was rooted in a tradition of service, a tradition of people who kept their word, a tradition of people who refused to disappear when institutions tried to erase them. Courtroom 4B, Cumberland County Courthouse. Morning light through the windows. A judge presiding. Official but not memorable. No single personality, because the judge represented the system itself, not a person. Avery was testifying about the complaint he had filed. Grant Holloway, Marin's lawyer, rose for cross-examination. His voice was precise, controlled, the voice of someone who had spent years learning to dismantle false narratives using only language and evidence and the relentless exposure of contradiction. "Officer Avery, you filed this complaint after a personal physical altercation with my client on a public trail. Is that correct?" Avery denied it, claimed he had never met her before. The lie was so transparent that Holloway almost smiled. "Then how did you know where she works? How did you know her name? How did you know what to complain about? How did you file a complaint before she ever had a teaching license?" Avery's story fractured. His confident bearing cracked. He stood. Sudden movement. Anger visible now. Not hidden anymore. The control that had held him together up to this point was breaking down. The judge warned him to remain seated. He ignored the warning. He approached the defense table where Marin was seated. His face was red now. His breathing was heavy. All the restraint was gone. All the institutional veneer was stripped away, leaving just the man underneath. The man who had been thrown on a Greenway and couldn't let it go. The man who couldn't accept that a woman had beaten him. The man who had spent 4 months using the system to try to destroy her life. He raised his hand. The crack split through the courtroom like a rifle shot. Her left hand caught his wrist before his arm completed the follow-through. The motion was automatic. Muscle memory. The response that comes from 9 years of military training. Her right hand locked his elbow from underneath. Her hips dropped. Center of gravity shifting low. The floor rushed up to meet him. Back first. The impact heavy and wet and absolute. The sound of his skull bouncing once against tile. His eyes rolled back. She stepped back. Hands open. Palms flat. Feet shoulder-width apart. The same stance. The stance that only exists in muscle memory forged through years of repetition. Drilling. Certification. Annual retesting. The stance that nobody except someone with 9 years of Army military police training could take by instinct. The room was absolute silence. 34 witnesses, 1 sitting judge, 1 off-duty officer lying on the floor of a courthouse, staring up at fluorescent lights, understanding with absolute clarity that his institutional protection had just failed him, that his badge meant nothing in the moment when he actually needed it, that the woman he had tried to destroy had just dismantled him in open court, in front of everyone, without escalating further, without doing more damage than necessary. The bailiff reached for his radio. "Officer down. We have an officer who just assaulted a defendant in open court. Defendant responded in self-defense. Officer is down, conscious but non-responsive. Medical units en route. Ambulance first, police second." The operator's voice crackled back. "Professional, operating on protocol. Copy, units rolling occupancy. 1 officer, 1 defendant, 1 judge, bailiff, court reporter, approximately 30 observers, no other injuries." The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. The police arrived 9 minutes after that. The video started spreading before Avery was even loaded into the ambulance. Someone had recorded it, had caught the moment of reversal, had captured exactly what happened on their phone camera. 12 million views across platforms in 5 days. Trending, shared, watched, analyzed, debated. But Marin didn't watch the video. Not once. The verdict was obvious before any testimony could continue. She had been sitting at the defense table when he approached. She had been seated. He had raised his hand and struck her. She had defended herself. The entire incident had been witnessed by a judge and recorded on courtroom cameras. The legal determination was not complicated. The licensing board suspended its investigation 2 days later. The complaint was removed from her record. An official statement was issued suggesting that the complaint had been filed without adequate basis, and that her teaching methods were appropriate, and that she had been the victim of a false accusation. Avery was charged with assault. He was suspended from the department pending investigation. His private lawyer submitted written responses to the IG's questions, carefully drafted, legally airtight, revealing nothing. The IG's office expanded its scope to include the complaint handling process itself, then expanded again to include all supervisory sign-offs on cases dismissed over the previous 3 years. The investigation was ongoing, would continue to be ongoing, would possibly never conclude with the kind of clear justice that people wanted. But none of that happened in the real moment. In the real moment, there was just the courtroom aftermath. The paramedics, the understanding spreading through everyone present that the system had just seen itself in the mirror. And the reflection was ugly. Avery went down. He got up. His career didn't. The charges that had been filed against Marin were dropped. The false accusation was removed from any record that mattered. She was free. But something else happened, too. Something quieter and more profound. The people in that courtroom understood something about power that they hadn't understood before. They understood that authority doesn't always win, that institutions don't always protect their own, that sometimes a person who has been wronged, who has been patient, who has been disciplined, can dismantle the system that has been used against her, with nothing but precision and training and the absolute certainty that she is in the right. The video of the courtroom moment spread everywhere. 12 million views across platforms. People watched it in fragments, in clips, in various edits that emphasized different moments. Some watched it as a story about power. Some watched it as a story about justice. Some watched it as a story about race and authority and institutional failure. But Marin didn't watch it. Instead, 3 days after the courtroom incident, she did something she hadn't done in months. She drove to her mother's house. She parked her car. She walked inside without needing to be invited or prompted or asked to explain herself. Her mother was making pot roast. The dish was familiar. It had been Marin's father's favorite. The smell of it simmering in the kitchen brought back decades of memory compressed into a single moment. They sat down to eat. Marin's mother didn't ask about the video, didn't ask about the incident, didn't ask about Avery or the board hearing or any of the procedural details that had consumed the previous 4 months. She just set the food down and said, "I am proud of you. Your father would be proud of you." Marin ate. For the first time in what felt like years, she was present. Not documenting, not preparing, not guarding herself against the next threat. Just eating her mother's food and sitting at her mother's table and being someone's daughter instead of being a soldier or a victim or a woman fighting the system. After dinner, she called Holloway. The lawyer told her that 3 threads remained open. The recovered audio from the deleted body cam footage. The SBI was still attempting sector-level reconstruction. Estimated another 4 to 6 months. The IG's expanding investigation. It was growing beyond Avery now, beginning to look at patterns, at institutional issues within the department, at whether this was an isolated incident or part of something larger. And the anonymous threat, the voicemail saying, "Drop it, you don't want this." The prepaid phone purchased during a surveillance camera blackout. The voice never identified. The caller never found. But Marin understood something that Holloway was still discovering. She didn't need the system to finish the job. The system would never finish it cleanly. Cases like this didn't end. They just became archived, ongoing, bureaucratic, but she had already gotten what mattered. She had already shown herself and everyone who witnessed it that she couldn't be broken, that her discipline and training and documentation mattered, that the institution that had tried to destroy her had instead destroyed itself. The next morning at 4:47 a.m., she woke before her alarm. She made her bed with hospital corners. She laced her shoes to exact specifications. She clipped the flashlight to her waistband and stepped outside into the pre-dawn dark. The Fort Bragg Greenway was empty the way it always was. She started running counterclockwise, past the retention pond, through the stand of longleaf pines, around the storm drainage junction. The same route, the same direction, the same discipline. But something was different. A new sign had been posted at the trailhead, official county seal, black text on white reflective background. "This area is under 24-hour video surveillance." She read it twice, looked up at the tree line, searched for a camera. This time there actually was one, mounted on the post, wiring visible, junction box attached, blinking red light showing that it was active. The system had finally delivered on its promise. Marin stood there for 11 seconds, counting the way she always counted. Then she turned, faced the trail, and started running. 5.2 miles through the pine corridor, past the retention pond, past the access road where a patrol car had once waited in the dark with its headlights on. The trail was empty. The air was clean. The only sound was her breathing and the steady rhythmic impact of her shoes on the pavement, a cadence that hadn't changed, hadn't faltered, hadn't stopped, not once, not for any of them. If this story hit you, if you watched until the end because you needed to know what happened to someone who refused to disappear, please subscribe to our channel. Because the next story might be about someone who does not have 9 years of training, someone who does not have a folder full of documentation, someone who does not get back up the way she did. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.